In August 2017, the then President of the United States, Donald Trump, surprised the world with a statement that broke diplomatic codes. He said he did not rule out military action to address the crisis in Venezuela, a country devastated economically and socially after years of poor decisions inherited from Chavismo and deepened by the disastrous regime of Nicolás Maduro. It was the first time that Washington openly hinted at the use of force against the Venezuelan government. Just a few months later, he would proclaim himself re-elected in elections that were clearly fraudulent and illegitimate, not only in the eyes of the United States, but also for much of the international community. That same day, Trump signed an executive order that severely tightened financial sanctions against the Venezuelan government and promoted the diplomatic non-recognition of the new term, a stance that would soon be supported by the European Union and the Lima Group. 3 months later, in August 2018, during a military parade in Caracas, drones loaded with explosives detonated near the presidential platform. Just as Nicolás Maduro was delivering one of his speeches on national television, the reaction was immediate. The security ring closed in quickly. The bodyguards surrounded the president and covered him while he was left paralyzed, not understanding what was happening. The attack injured 7, but the president was unharmed. In just seconds, power shook, leaving an indelible mark. The message was clear. He was no longer safe, not even at a military event, in broad daylight and in front of the cameras. From that moment on, fear settled in Nicolás Maduro's body and would never leave him. The episode marked a turning point. Presidential security collapsed, shifting from preventive to obsessive. The attack had exposed an alarming internal fragility. The armor of power could easily crack. Maduro's death stopped being a distant hypothesis and became a real, tangible possibility, disturbingly close. The dictator instantly ordered full militarization of his surroundings. More than ever, he needed the armed forces firmly on his side, anchored to the regime by a Nazi-like loyalty, needs of convenience. It was necessary to strengthen loyalties, since 2019 would begin with one of the hardest blows against the world. Maduro's mandate was widely unrecognized in and outside Venezuela. The National Assembly declared the 2018 elections illegitimate and labeled Maduro as a usurper, raising the pressure to force a constitutional exit. On January 23rd, a date full of historical symbolism for Venezuela, Juan Guaidó, then president of the National Assembly, was sworn in as interim president, invoking the articles of the Constitution that addressed the vacancy of power. Within hours, the United States recognized him as the legitimate president, followed by dozens of countries in Latin America and Europe. The international pressure on Nicolás Maduro was tightening like never before. The tension reached its peak on April 30th when the uprising known as Operation Liberty began. Guaidó, backed by soldiers, freed opposition leader Leopoldo López, and he called on the people to take to the streets in several cities across the country, urging the rest of the armed forces to reject the regime. For hours, uncertainty gripped Caracas, but the military leadership stayed loyal to Maduro and stopped the uprising. The day left dozens injured and at least 4 dead in clashes with the security forces. The failure of Operation Libertad left a brutally clear conclusion. Without breaking the support of the key generals, any attempt at an internal overthrow was doomed to fail. True power lay not in institutions, but in the military's absolute control. Maduro's response was harsh and immediate. Opposition deputies were imprisoned, others forced into exile, and repression intensified in the streets with renewed violence. Maduro's regime survived one of its most critical moments, but something had been exposed. The armed forces had shown an initial fracture, a small crack, where the end could finally start to seep through. The year 2020 marked a shift toward much more direct and aggressive strategies to capture Nicolás Maduro. On March 25, the United States Department of Justice took an important and unprecedented step. It formally charged Nicolás Maduro with narco-terrorism, drug trafficking, and corruption. accusing him of leading the so-called Cartel of the Suns and conspiring with the Colombian Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia guerrilla to flood United States territory with cocaine. For the first time, a sitting president was treated by Washington not only as a dictator, but as an international criminal. That same day, a reward of $15 million was offered for information leading to the arrest or conviction of Nicolás Maduro Moros, a measure until then reserved for leaders of global criminal and terrorist organizations. At the same time, Donald Trump's administration tightened the political siege by designating Venezuela as a state sponsor of terrorism. Maduro immediately rejected the accusations, calling them an imperialist farce, a ridiculous attempt to provoke internal division. But the real objective of the American move went beyond political rhetoric. The $1 million reward was a direct message to the Venezuelan armed forces, an explicit incentive for someone to betray the president. In that context, a direct armed incursion against the government of Nicolás Maduro was planned. Between May 3 and 4, 2020, Operation Gideon was conducted, a secret plan by dissident former Venezuelan military officers. Motivated by the $1 million reward and with the support of the American Private Security Company Corporation, the gamble was reckless. Infiltrate by sea, take control of a strategic airbase, and capture the dictator along with many of his top officials. Then take them out of the country. 2 boats with around 60 armed men set sail from the Colombian coast toward Venezuela, but the operation failed from the very beginning. The Venezuelan security forces intercepted the groups on the beaches of Macuto and Chuao, neutralizing the incursion within a matter of hours. Everything indicated that the conspiracy had been infiltrated, betrayed from within. Several participants died in clashes, and others were captured alive. 2 of them were former members of the United States Special Forces and were displayed on national television as political trophies. Maduro publicly denounced that it was an international terrorist incursion coordinated by the United States and Colombia, with the goal of assassinating him and overthrowing his government. The operation, far from toppling the regime, ended up reinforcing its narrative of external siege and justifying a new tightening of internal control. The message was clear once again: power would not fall easily. Although Washington denied any official involvement, the episode had a profound impact. Operation Gideon confirmed the regime's worst fears. Were there real, concrete, and armed plans to capture Nicolás Maduro? However, the scenario began to change shortly after. In January 2021, with the change in the White House and the arrival of Joe Biden, the United States strategy took a significant turn. Washington shifted from covert operations and direct confrontation to sustained political pressure, the selective tightening of sanctions, and the opening of negotiation channels. For a while longer, the United States government maintained its recognition of Juan Guaidó as president, the legitimate president of Venezuela, and kept the sanctions architecture against Chavismo intact. But now these came with negotiated incentives. That year, talks sponsored by Norway were opened and later moved to Mexico, which eventually culminated in the signing of the Barbados Agreement. Within that framework, the Venezuelan government committed to improving electoral conditions in exchange for a partial reduction of oil sanctions. Of course, that commitment would not be fulfilled. This was evident from the beginning. In October 2023, the primary elections were held, where Maria Corina Machado, with a direct and uncompromising stance against Chavismo, achieved a resounding victory, immediately becoming the undisputed face of the opposition. The regime's response was swift and decisive. Maduro ordered her to be disqualified politically, blocking her path to any presidential candidacy. With that, the government once again cut off the possibility of a genuinely competitive election, making it clear that the electoral process remained strictly controlled. From his position of power, Maduro was not willing to let go of control. That's why, in 2024, the regime openly and shamelessly manipulated the electoral process to stay in power. Several countries in the region, as well as international observers, denounced that those elections had been a complete fraud, an undisguised theft. This time, the evidence was too blatant to hide. The electoral referee was controlled by the ruling party, international observation was restricted, and after the voting, the official results lacked transparent and verifiable records. It was obvious to everyone that the result had been decided before the polls even opened. The complaints all agreed on one central point. The real winner had been Edmundo Gonzalez, the candidate who replaced Maria Corina Machado and who had her explicit support. The United States recognized him as the legitimate president, deepening the international isolation of the regime. However, that recognition was not enough to change the reality of power. By late 2024, Venezuela faced an uncertain future, with Nicolás Maduro still entrenched in the Miraflores palace. And despite abundant evidence of fraud, everything indicated that there was no effective mechanism to take control of the state away from him. He knew it, and that certainty made him feel more confident, more rooted, more powerful than ever.
Come for me. They're waiting for you here in Miraflores. Don't take long to get here, coward. Come for me, coward.
The electoral paths seemed completely closed, and the population remained trapped in a devastating economic, social, and migratory crisis. A shared exhaustion with no clear escape or credible political future. In that hopeless atmosphere, 2025 brought an unexpected twist to the board. Donald Trump returned to the White House, this time with the explicit determination to finish the job he had started in his first term. Starting his second term in January 2025, Donald Trump openly prepared the legal, political, and military groundwork to capture Nicolás Maduro. On his inauguration day, he signed a highly strategic executive order. This allowed the United States to designate foreign criminal organizations as terrorist groups, including Venezuelan gangs like Tren de Aragua, which he described as a direct threat. Trump went even further. He publicly claimed that Maduro's government was actively collaborating with this cartel, facilitating drug trafficking networks, and fueling illegal migration to the United States. The decision sparked a wave of controversy, as it was effectively elevating Venezuela to the same threat level as organizations like Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State. The objective was clear. With this maneuver, Trump aimed to build a solid legal foundation that would allow him to act under the anti-terrorism doctrine, justifying the use of force, without the need for new multilateral agreements to reinforce that legal and symbolic framework. The reward for the capture of Nicolás Maduro was increased from $15 to $25 million. Months later, the amount would double again, reaching $50 million. An unmistakable sign that the objective had become a priority. Trump was not improvising. Every step followed a cold, cunning, and calculated plan designed to lead to a single outcome: the end of Nicolás Maduro. This was how what already had a name within Washington's circles of power began to unfold: the Absolute Resolution Plan. The clock had started ticking. Washington then began a military deployment of exceptional proportions around Venezuela. On August 19, 2025, the United States sent 3 guided missile destroyers to the region, a clear sign that the warning phase was over. Over the next weeks, the military presence steadily intensified. Those destroyers were joined by 3 amphibious assault ships, additional warships, and about 6,000 troops. Meanwhile, F-35 stealth fighter jets were deployed to strategic bases in Puerto Rico, and even a nuclear submarine armed with cruise missiles began operating quietly near the Caribbean. By the end of August, nearly 20% of the entire United States war fleet was concentrated in those waters. It was the largest buildup of United States military power in the region since the invasion of Panama in 1989. The message was impossible to ignore. Trump left no room for interpretation and declared to the press, "Venezuela is not far away, and we have gone much further for freedom before." Earlier, on September 2, 2025 that rhetoric turned into action. That day, the first direct military attack took place. Trump announced that United States forces had destroyed a boat suspected of transporting drugs from Venezuela, allegedly operated by the Tren de Aragua. The vessel was intercepted and blown to pieces in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, causing the death of 11 of its crew members. Trump himself was in charge of releasing the video of the attack, in which the boat could be seen engulfed in an explosion of fire and smoke over the ocean. It was not a casual gesture, it was a deliberate show of force, a visual message directed both at Caracas and the rest of the world. The policy of warning was over. That marked the beginning of a series of low-scale military actions, but with lethal impact. On September 15th, they sank a second vessel, causing the deaths of 3 more people. 4 days later, on September 19th, a third attack again stained the Caribbean waters with blood. Trump stated that the ocean had also been littered with huge bags of cocaine and fentanyl. In Washington, alarms began to go off. Several members of Congress openly questioned the legality of the operations, warning that the president was assuming war powers without proper legislative authorization, and that attacking alleged drug traffickers on the high seas dangerously bordered on extrajudicial executions. Instead of backing down, Trump doubled down with a move as controversial as it was decisive. He formally declared that the United States was in armed conflict against Venezuelan drug cartels and authorized the CIA to carry out covert and overt operations inside enemy territory. It was a war manifesto that would unfold both at sea and in the shadows. By October 27, the Pentagon had already counted more than 100 dead as a result of about 35 military operations carried out since the beginning of September. Some of them were involved in highly controversial episodes, like those 2 survivors who were left adrift after their boat was shot down. Surrendered and clinging to an overturned boat, they were killed by the impact of a missile. The scene, described by witnesses and later leaks, led to direct accusations of violations of international human rights law. But in November, despite the criticism, Trump intensified the military offensive. The tension reached its peak with the arrival in the Caribbean of the aircraft carrier Gerald Air Force, accompanied by the deployment of about 12,000 United States troops, which openly hinted at the possibility of a ground invasion. The response was swift. Venezuela reacted with a massive troop mobilization, denouncing to the international community a direct threat against its national sovereignty. The countdown had begun on December 10th. The United States initiated a de facto maritime blockade. That same day, their forces intercepted a tanker loaded with $2 million worth of these barrels of Venezuelan crude oil, claiming that the vessel was part of an illicit network intended to finance terrorist organizations. The reaction in Caracas was furious. The government denounced the operation as a blatant theft and an act of international piracy. Instead of moderating his tone, Trump increased the pressure. On December 16, he formally announced a total blockade on any oil tanker entering or leaving Venezuela. He stated that the goal was to suffocate Nicolás Maduro's criminal economy, claiming that the country's oil revenues were being used to finance terrorism, drug trafficking, and other crimes. But the statement continued. In one of the most controversial statements of the entire crisis, Trump promised to continue increasing the military deployment until Venezuela returned the oil, land, and assets to the United States. The insinuation was unsettling, as it seemed to claim some kind of right over Venezuelan resources. This comment dispelled any remaining doubts. Beyond the fight against drug trafficking, terrorism, or dictatorship, it was clear what was really at stake. By late December, the United States offensive became even more aggressive. In addition to visible strikes, covert attacks like a CIA-attributed drone bombing and new naval strikes were added. The pressure was relentless. Trump had Maduro surrounded, cornered, and frightened. The dictator tried an unexpected move. He proposed opening direct negotiations with Washington, even offering joint initiatives to fight drug trafficking. It was an obviously desperate attempt to avoid an invasion that seemed imminent, but the response was silence. Trump completely ignored the offer, according to a version published by the British newspaper, The Telegraph. Maduro then made one last move, perhaps the most revealing of all. Amid growing military and diplomatic pressure, he held a 15-minute call with Donald Trump to negotiate his surrender. In it, he put a price on his exit from power. The proposal was as blunt as it was explicit and apparently tempting. Since Maduro wasn't demanding money from the United States, he was only asking to keep a part of his personal fortune, $200 million. He also wanted full amnesty for himself, his family, and at least 100 top government officials, guarantees of protection for his closest circle and safe exile options in allied countries like Cuba, China, or Russia, an offer that, in essence, was an implicit confession. The regime no longer felt capable of resisting. For Trump, it was easy to decline. He knew he had practically won the war. There was no reason to give in or to accept unnecessary concessions that would weaken the narrative he had maintained for months. But Maduro insisted. On January 1st, 2026, in a televised message addressed to the country and the world, he stated that he was open to negotiating with the United States to achieve peace. Another desperate gesture arrived too late. The gears of military intervention were already in motion. Hours later, in the early morning of January 3rd, 2026, the United States carried out the culminating action of the entire escalation, the final act of the plan, known as absolute resolution. The decisive blow was ready at 2 a.m. Caracas shook as war erupted. At least 7 explosions signaled the start of a coordinated, precise, and devastating attack. It was the signal for the start of an air offensive led by more than 100 soldiers. American aircraft flying at low altitude, cutting through the night. With a deafening roar, the ground in the streets began to rumble, the buildings vibrated, and the windows shook until it felt like an earthquake. The sky lit up with flashes, while columns of smoke rose in the distance. Some only managed to see the fire in the distance, while others felt the sharp impact of the shockwave in their bodies. But the offensive was not indiscriminate. It targeted carefully selected key objectives. Explosions occurred at La Carlota Air Base, the Fuerte Tiuna military complex, and military sites in Miranda and Aragua, at La Guaira Port, the main sea outlet from the capital, and at Higuerote Airport. At the same time, communication antennas in the volcano area were neutralized. The goal was clear and strategic: to isolate Caracas militarily and in community communication, to prevent any reinforcements, block all capacity for a coordinated response, paralyzing the counterattack before it could even be organized. Under these conditions, a dozen helicopters specialized in night operations, known as Night Stalkers, burst into the Caracas sky, advancing in tight formation toward the main point. On board were elite Delta Force commandos, a unit designed exclusively for the capture of high-risk targets. They were prepared. They knew exactly where to strike and how to do it. Nothing was left to chance. Every variable had been anticipated, since for months the CIA had deployed undercover agents inside Venezuela, weaving a silent and patient network. This bore fruit. They found what they had been searching for: an informant within the closed circle of power of the regime. Finally, a member of Nicolás Maduro's inner circle was willing to betray him. His information was thorough, precise, and consistent. He revealed the daily movements, the residence where he was hiding, the times when he moved around, what he ate, how he dressed, and even the names of his pets. Every detail was recorded, cross-checked, and verified until a complete profile was built of a man who until then seemed to be untouchable. Preparation went even further. The intelligence services obtained the complete blueprints of the house, and with that information they built an exact replica of the house that would be attacked. They recreated the hallways, steel doors, blind spots, internal accesses, and every key corner. There, the commandos trained over and over again, rehearsing every move, every turn, every possible contingency to achieve a flawless, clean operation with no margin for error. When the helicopters descended, little was left to improvise. The first priority was to face enemy attacks, and that's exactly what happened. The Venezuelan and Cuban guards in charge of Nicolás Maduro's security tried to thwart the operation by opening fire immediately. The attempt was chaotic and desperate. One of the helicopters was hit by gunfire during its descent, but it managed to stay in the air. The American response was lethal. The special forces reacted with overwhelmingly superior firepower, neutralizing the threat. In a matter of moments, the confrontation left a devastating toll of at least 80 dead, all members of the presidential security ring. The resistance was crushed before it could reorganize under the cover of absolute darkness. The Delta Force soldiers quickly descended using ropes, taking up strategic positions around Nicolás Maduro's bunker ship. They were equipped with high-powered weapons and cutting tools, including an industrial blowtorch, ready to break through the reinforced steel doors, whose existence they knew in detail. Within seconds, the perimeter was completely secured. The troops stormed into the house, using explosive charges to breach the armored entrances. Inside, they encountered Maduro's Praetorian Guard. He, aware that the attack was only a matter of time, had reinforced his personal escort, adding heavily armed men trained for combat. Close by, for the final defense, in the hallways, a brief but intense shootout broke out, a violent exchange that lasted only minutes. The result was overwhelming. The assault force suffered no casualties. Only 2 soldiers were wounded and evacuated alive, while the presidential escort was eliminated one by one with no chance to retreat. After finishing with them, the assault team advanced to the master bedroom, where Nicolás Maduro was with his wife Celia Flores. According to intelligence sources later cited by the press, they tried to escape to a panic room reinforced with steel, but they didn't make it. The commandos cornered them before they could close the door, with no escape routes and no support. The president gave up all resistance, and his wife did the same. Everything was lost for them. After 12 years and 8 months of dictatorship, the nightmare for Venezuela had ended, and theirs was about to begin. Within 30 minutes, the American helicopters were already leaving the area with the detainees on board. During the extraction phase, there were some additional clashes, a last attempt at resistance by the Venezuelan guards, but the response was immediate. The airspace was completely covered by helicopters. Gunships and support teams held off the counterattack without difficulty, and the aircraft managed a successful evacuation. Nicolás Maduro and his wife were first moved to the United States ship Iwo Jima, an amphibious assault ship stationed in the Caribbean Sea. It was there that the photograph which would go around the world was taken. The man who had long defied and evaded international sanctions, accusations, and persecution now appeared in custody, permanently separated from that power that made him feel invincible. From the ship, the couple was transported by air to New York, where they would face the wrath of American justice. Both would be charged with conspiracy and narco-terrorism, putting an end to the plan that Trump had conceived and waited for years. The mission had been accomplished. Operation Absolute Resolution had ended before dawn, and Venezuela woke up plunged into absolute uncertainty. In a message broadcast on national television, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced an imperialist attack. She claimed not to know the whereabouts of President Nicolás Maduro or the First Lady, and demanded that the Trump administration provide immediate proof of life. The official confirmation would come shortly after. Trump broke the international silence with a message posted on his Truth Social network. The United States has carried out a major attack on Venezuela and its leader. President Nicolás Maduro, who along with his wife has been captured and taken out of the country, The news shook the entire world and spread quickly. At first there was disbelief, caution, skepticism, but as the hours passed, images began to emerge one after another, dispelling doubts and confirming what, until then, had seemed unthinkable. Nicolás Maduro had fallen, and with him, nearly 27 years of Chavista hegemony, a period that had meant a prolonged wound for Venezuela. Years marked by dictatorship, corruption, hyperinflation, expropriations, shortages, blackouts, fear, repression, exile. Over 8 million Venezuelans have had to rebuild their lives away from home. They were the living proof of all the damage caused by the terrible decisions of Hugo Chavez, and even worse, those of Nicolás Maduro. On January 3rd, 2026, Venezuela woke up, changed for the first time in decades. The constant weight in their chest began to slowly ease. Joy was neither immediate nor overwhelming. First came silence, tears, disbelief, a cautious pause from a country that, after so much pain, was afraid to rejoice too soon. They needed proof to confirm it was real this time. A moment to remember those who are no longer here, those who died waiting for news that took so long to arrive. To those who left with a suitcase and a promise to return that never came for years, they were asked to hold on. They were promised that everything would get better, that the opposition would eventually win, but that never happened. However, that day, that historic January 3rd, it finally happened. The official statements and the images confirmed it. The biggest obstacle to starting change had been removed. Nicolás Maduro had been captured. It didn't mean that everything was resolved, nor did it erase the accumulated suffering or immediately heal those open wounds. But for the first time in a very, very long time, Venezuela found hope again, embraced it again. This happened both inside and outside the country. Venezuelans worldwide gathered in streets and squares to celebrate and embrace each other. And those who weren't Venezuelan could still feel the significance of this victory. That day, tricolor flags filled the world. I can imagine how much they must have dreamed of that moment, how many times they fantasized about the image of the monster finally captured, subdued, stripped of the arrogance and power with which he pretended to be invincible. There were reasons to celebrate, but not everyone agreed. Amid the joy, some voiced discomfort. Many were supporters of Chavismo, while others, though not aligned with Nicolás Maduro's dictatorship, warned as well on the risk of precedent. They pointed out that it was a dangerous blow for all of Latin America, capable of weakening the principle of sovereignty and opening the door to future interventions in institutionally fragile countries. For them, the fall of the regime did not justify the method. They argued that Donald Trump never stopped seeing Venezuela as an energy prize. His real goal wasn't defending democracy, nor did he feel any interest in the Venezuelan people, only in what lay beneath their soil. The real objective was oil. Trump would seize it, and the promise of freedom would turn into guardianship. It wasn't really a liberation, but rather looting disguised as aid, and there was nothing to celebrate.
It's been 26 years. I was 10 years old when this started. Oh no, the invasion. China invaded us, Russia invaded us, the Iranians invaded us. They don't know anything.
I deserve to celebrate and be happy despite how they poisoned my soul and heart. And what if I feel a bitter sense of justice because at least that dictator and murderer is being taken out of my country? Let me be happy and celebrate because they've already taken so much from us, even our freedom.
We are happy.
Today the day has come and it's the day of freedom, the day that both Venezuelans and I, like all these people here, like everyone around the world, were waiting for.
Can I speak for myself? My body is shaking from what's happening.
They caught Maduro. The regime fell early this morning, right now in Venezuela. They bombed him and took him into custody. He's out already. We are free now. Calm down.
Grandpa?
They took Maduro. They took Maduro. Trump. Trump, come on, get up. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Knowing my dad lived to see Nicolás Maduro's fall is so emotional for me.
That we've been waiting for a long time. This is becoming a reality. Something that all Venezuelans thought would never happen, and it happens. Today is a historic day.
I don't support the invasion, I support my country.
The owner took our hope. Today I felt immense pride when my son said, "Mom, we can go home."
Thank you for your attention, Donald Trump.
All right.
Winner, winner, him, the wife, him.
And they arrested Maduro?
They caught him. No.
Grandma?
Yes, he is.
My hair is standing on end. Oh, holy God, yes, Grandma, please. If Venezuela will change, God, Grandma.
Ma'am!
What happiness! So many people came out to wait for this, Lord. Thank you, sir. What love! Oh my God! This is immense joy. Thank you, sir. Thank you, President of the United States. I've just been waiting for a year.
How I've suffered, how they've hurt us, how they've killed my brothers.
9 years unable to visit my country, 9 Christmases without my mom. That's why we celebrate everything. Thank you, Peru. Thank you for opening all the doors. Thank you because when we needed it, you were here for us.
I'm grateful to Chile and love it with 2 Chilean grandchildren in my heart. But if possible, I wish to die in my homeland, Venezuela.
It's still too soon to know what will happen. The future is still open, full of uncertainties. But one thing is undeniable. This is a great victory, a giant step that brings them closer than ever before to that dream that all of Venezuela holds, for Venezuela to become Venezuela again. Consider Cuba. A dictatorship can last for decades, eventually corroding everything. Venezuela needed this breakthrough, this crack in the darkness, the real opportunity to finally start writing a different story, one that doesn't destroy their memories, that doesn't force them to flee. This is a story that is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. The next pages will be written over the coming months. Its ending will come with the years. And when that happens, we will be here. From this small channel, I send a sincere brotherly hug to all Venezuelans who resisted both at home and abroad, and to those who chose to keep fighting, even when everything seemed lost. I feel genuine happiness for all of you, and I promise to keep being here, telling this story that I was so eager to write, and that, after a long time, finally seems to be heading toward a happy ending. Thanks for staying with me. See you next time. Goodbye.